There we are. Hey,
Okay,
Jason, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you and everything that you've been doing lately. I've got a couple of your books here, the Chinese Thunder Magic and Practical Chinese Magic. I haven't yet bought the Fox Immortal book in print yet, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for putting this out into the world. This Thunder Magic manual, that really changed my perspective on some of the stuff I do.
Yeah, I'd like to explain a bit more about that actually. Like the when I first come back from China, I come back to England, I was looking for some books myself, you know, thinking, you know, I realized there isn't much on the market really. So not in English anyway, so someone's got to do it. You either pick up like these really dry academic essays, which are useful in their own way, you know, which describe all the history of the Song dynasty and, you know, and all that, but it's not much use for people, you know. So it's about time to get something out there that people can actually use, you know, in a kind of practical way. But the Thunder Magic's an interesting one, because that's kind of, even though I like the book, it's a direct translation actually of a small Chinese book, which is a kind of like, I suppose it's like a sadhana. I think you might call it in Buddhism or something like that, like for personal cultivation. But there's kind of an experiment to see whether, it, you know, by my publisher, because we're sort of unsure where this is going to go. So, but hopefully we're going to get out a new edition of Thunder Magic, which is like that thick, not like this, you know, so with much more material, background, and more what you're dealing with. So this first book was a bit of an experiment. So it's almost pamphlet sized, you know. So
yeah, I think this guy is what is this, 67 pages?
Yeah.
And you know, you do have a good amount of like food talismans and stuff in the back that are not well described on how to use them. I just think they're really interesting. So I'm looking forward to the new tome that's a little thicker with more.
Yeah, it definitely needs to be a new edition of Thunder Magic, which goes far more into detail, you know, further into the Qigong and the alchemy and how you involve the 5 organs and so on. You know, as you know, you're a Bagua practitioner, and one of the first factors is, you know, is Gen is one of the trigrams. You know, it's like a really important idea, and it's got some links into your Bagua system actually. You know,
yes, I have noticed that. It's the first time I've seen Marshall Pung depicted in an illustration, and when I was training with Craig Stevens from the Qingyi Kung Fu system here in the United States, he's married to a Chinese lady, and he was telling me very, you know, adamantly, like, you know, it's Pung. Like the Pung has a very specific reference. You know, he's like, don't call it the Golden Eagle. And so that was something that I found interesting. And then I found, you know, this Marshall Pung guy here on your book cover, and I found that to be particularly interesting. Now, I've mainly been able to find resources about Garuda and his link to UFA. Is there any information about UFA and Marshall Pung that you have?
You can wait to my next book, but yeah, there is a link. There is a link. You're talking about. Did you say Garuda? Like the flying eagle of Hinduism? Yeah. Yeah, there is a link, but that comes through. If you look at most thunder gods, they have this look with an eagle face and, you know, claws mixed in with a human being. So, which is an image you can find probably right back to Babylon, actually. As you go down to the Sumerian civilization and all that, they're showing something very similar. You know, take a look at the Nineveh Gate, for example, I think. But so this image is like being all along the Silk Road, you know, for centuries, which is really interesting. And also the idea of thunder magic itself, like Indra, you know, in Indian philosophy and so on. Some of the terms are interchangeable, in fact, you know. So like you have the thunderbolt, which can be kind of translated sometimes as Vajra thunderbolt, which you see everywhere in, you know, the traditions. And so this is really interesting Indo-European, but also a Chinese connection as well, which is really interesting with the thunder magic. But I do take it from that's not to say that
Persia, right?
Yeah. So the links between martial Peng, which was only one of four, actually, four major ones. There are 36 Thunder Generals.
Okay.
They're each kind of specific to a certain task. The Chinese being the Chinese, they call it the ministry, you know. It sounds like very Orwellian, you know, Thunder Magic Bureau.
Bureaucratic heaven.
You know, it's, right, but so yeah, so I would like to go much deeper into that actually with my with one of my future books, but I'm up to here with projects at the moment.
Right.
I can probably see that stack of translations behind me, right? So, but I promise I'll bring out something. This will be a good introduction, the Little Thunder one, but then you'll get a much bigger one, you know, like 500-600 pages. With more data, and we'll also improve on the
Thank you
images
so much.
Yeah, it just needs to be done. You know, it's been too long. I mean, for the same problem happened with, say, Tibetan things. You know, there was a Tibetan tradition. Yeah, people were like thinking, yeah, there's this wonderful tradition in the Himalayas of hidden masters, but no one really knew anything about it. You know, so people were trusting people like Madame Blavatsky and people like that, saying, talking about the hidden masters in the Himalayas, you know, and all this sort of thing. And no one really knew anything about it. So people were kind of like guessing, using secondhand sources from Jesuits and things like that, or obscure Orientalism texts, Orientalist texts, and this kind of thing. And it's only now recently, since 60s, 70s, that the Tibetan thing has really taken off in Europe and the United States. So, and I think there's a similar situation.
The Chinese conquering of the Tibetan plateau?
That could have, yeah, there was certainly a diaspora of it, but I think it would have happened anyway. And then maybe that's just the destiny, the karma of it. I don't know. I should be careful what I say.
Of course.
But because, you know, now people have got access to translated tantras and stuff that were never previously available before. And I think the same thing, you know, it happened with India, then it happened with Tibet, and now it needs to happen with China. See, the picture that people have got of Taoism now is not entirely accurate, because we've been relying on that academia, which is good in one way, but in another it gives you an unrealistic picture of Chinese spiritual culture, you know. So it seems to center around this like Daoist orthodoxy, Qigong and martial arts, and that's all people think, you know. But there's a lot more to it, and that's what I want to bring. I want to bring that other part, the folk tradition, if you like, the stuff that's driven underground in Chinese culture. Yeah, probably the stuff that, in fact, it will. I was put in jail for 2 days in China, you know, for mixing with unregistered masters. It's kind of like that, you know. That was an awful experience.
Sorry.
Well, it's part of the risk, you know. So I was bringing, you know, so I think there needs to be a bringing forth of more of these folk materials, you know, because what people are getting at the moment is like the Catholic doctrine, if you like. That's the best way to put it. What they need to see is more of the folk traditions that people are doing at homes and in villages, and which have really long lineages, sometimes longer than the so-called orthodox Taoism, you know. It's like,
right.
You know,
like a lot of the Wudong temples, it's a reconstructed practice and lineage. Exactly,
yeah. You know, a lot was lost after Mao Zedong, and even the Qing dynasty, you know, you had the 1644, like people talk about China, but what they don't realize is that since 1644, China's not really been China, because the Manchu people invaded from the north.
And they're from like Korea area, right?
Yeah, like a Mongol race. pretty much conquered China and killed loads of priests and things like that. And the only religion that they were allowed to ratify was Quanzhen, really, you know, because it has this Buddhist mix. So it's has a heavily Buddhist influence, which was acceptable to the Genghis Khan's ancestors, the Yuan dynasty, and secondly the Qing dynasty, right? Yeah. And a lot of what you learn now, the martial arts and everything, was actually done by people that ran away from the Qing dynasty, hid in the forests and had secret temples and meetings. Right. And they want to restore the Ming dynasty, which is what they considered Chinese, which is why you do this, for example.
Right, the sun and moon.
It's the character for Ming dynasty.
Right.
Right.
So in our Reiki tradition, we have in the master level a symbol that we call Daikomyo in Japanese, but in Chinese it would be Dagongming, and so that last character is the sun and moon at the bottom, or part of the character, I should say.
Sure.
And you're not the first person I've heard this from about the Ming dynasty, you know, like the restore the Ming. Scott Park Phillips has been talking about, you know, some of these.
Yeah, and this one.
You're right.
Yeah.
And then the founder of Bagua, Dong Haichan, he sat in a very specific way, and somebody said that is, you know, like he's got one foot with the sole of his foot facing outward toward people, and apparently that is a symbol that he was involved with a specific sect. Is that something you're aware of?
I hadn't heard of that one, I had to admit. But yeah, I mean, it's really possible that he was a member of most martial artists were also members of secret societies like Hong Men and stuff, which were all about restoration of the Ming dynasty. I mean, but at a certain point, I think they knew that, resistance is futile, you know, and they kind of retreated within themselves, forests and mountains, and that retreat was actually a good thing. You know, it kind of like they really cultivated themselves, you know, as groups, and brought a lot together. A lot of what you see now, like the founder of Bagua is a classic example. You know, Dong, is it? You know, I'm not really a martial artist in that sense. You know, I don't do the martial arts history. I'm not very good at arguing with people about it, so.
Right. Well, you know, that's the thing is Dong is really kind of a mystery. We have some idea that he may have been an assassin for the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. And there's recently been a Chinese documentary that Byron Jacobs is translating on Mushin martial culture. He lives in Beijing, and he was talking about how Dong's master was had Red Lotus in his name, and that's a very odd thing because
not if you know the history of secret societies. It's not mysterious at all. Red Lotus Society, White Lotus Society.
That was a big clue back to White Lotus, which is something that you've mentioned in the past. So they maybe changed the color from white to red.
Bailian, yeah, Bailian Society. It's got such a long and complex history, so but yeah, I mean, a lot of the martial arts came from secret societies, and a lot of those martial arts weren't training for, you know, MMA or something. They're for assassinating people, Qing officials, and guerrilla warfare, you know, which is why they don't often, you know, have this confrontational aspect. Is, you know, it's secret, what we called sneaky beaky stuff in the military, you know. So
right. Black ops.
So it's like so a lot of those guys were less about the kung fu school, you know, like you see in the movies, but they're more on the lines of groups of assassins who want to pick off, you know, Qing officials or perform guerrilla warfare. That's its original intention. Obviously, it changed over time, you know. But I have other theories about martial arts, but which I share with other people too.
One thing I've noticed as I get deeper into these arts is there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? You're like installing deities, like the Shengong stuff, into your body.
Yeah, which is probably where martial arts came from. This is a really ancient idea again. I mean, we can look back on, say, the Viking culture, you know, which had the, you know, the berserkers and the wolf, you know, the wolf men, you know, they would like get the, you know, the animal spirits. And but, you know, there was an Odin frenzy as well, you know, by getting the spirit of Odin into you, and you know, going berserk on your enemy. Pretty much every culture has this, you know. So English culture had it, and I'm not really a Western historian, but Chinese culture, it still has it today, you know. So I believe a lot of these martial arts were like inspired or brought through by shamanistic trance and ritual. In a sense. Sorry?
Are you familiar with Zach Louie and Andrea Vitamus?
Not really. I'm not that well read, to be honest with you. You know, right? I very rarely buy Western books, to be honest with you. Right.
Well, Zach is a Chinese gentleman that lives in Canada, and then he has a Western magic teacher named Andrea Vitamus.
Oh, okay.
So they have created a course called Shape Shifting 365. And from what I've heard them talk about this course, basically the idea is to take you through these like magical spiritual shape-shifting journeys inspired by like the animals of Chinese Eastern systems.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's bordering on what happens in Maoshan. We have our own ritual, and you go through all those, like the ones you'll be familiar with: tiger, leopard, crane, snake, dragon. Yeah, 5 animals. Which represents different parts of your body, which again depend on, which relate to the 5 elements and the 5 organs and everything else. But what would be unusual for martial artists is that Shenggong martial arts isn't something that you go to a dojo or something, say, hey, you want to learn karate? And, you know, it's like, you know, it's not like that, you know. You don't go to a studio and learn it. It takes years of cultivation. And then the nearest parallel I can think of is like Wudon. You get ridden, you know, by the spirits, you know, and there's a spontaneous martial art that comes out of this, which has to be seen to be believed. You know, it sounds like a lot of martial artists, they spend, you know, years, you know, training and everything, learning all these really complex forms. And a lot of Shenggong people do too, but we don't think it's essential. We call those rigid forms. Yeah. The real essence of martial arts is something that comes from heaven and goes into man, you know, and becomes consolidated. And that's what Shenggong teaches. But it's a really controversial point in martial arts, you know, so especially in China, not so much in the West, because it's not a thing, you know. You know, you don't open up a studio and say, hi everyone, and everyone starts choking on incense while you're trying to go into a trance, you know. You mean Bobby doesn't want to learn Shenggong? You know, right?
This 11-year-old is Shenggong right now. He's got a black belt already.
Well, Elvis was almost there, right? You know,
right. So, you know, I did want to mention a little bit about my personal experience. I wasn't even exposed to any of the Shenggong stuff until I was
you know, it happens to martial artists without them realizing it.
Yeah. I got invited to a private training group for a year-long intensive in somebody's, you know, guest house. It wasn't like a dojo or a kun or anything like that. It was literally just in somebody's home. And he's like, this is what we're doing. And, you know, with the spontaneous martial arts that you mentioned a moment ago, I had received a couple of empowerments from different members of these Bagua arts. And I literally felt like the last 3 palms, I didn't learn that in person, but the last 3 palms of that form, they came out spontaneously when I did a funeral rite for my uncle a few years back.
Right.
And so after the funeral,
yeah, that's a liminal point. That's when often when things like that happen, you know.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, it happens to martial arts all the time. I mean, you're a martial artist, right? So am I. We practice martial arts. We do the rigid forms, right, most of the time. But you get those moments where you just decide to, you know, get rid of all the forms and just do some stuff, yeah. And that, you know, and you thread all those techniques together and you forget what you're doing, and that's real martial arts to me.
I agree. Yeah. You know, if you can't put your martial arts Legos into a new form, you probably don't really understand it, you know?
Yeah. So I think a lot of those forms, you know, were codified Shenggong that masters had very far back, you know, at a certain point, and they kind of like come down eventually, and possibly, you know, it's a theory.
One of the things that I experienced when I was going through that training was like duplicating a version of myself and then putting it along the different palaces. So I would be in the center palace, and then the 8 palaces around me would have a different version of myself. And and then how to use that in a partner work and that sort of thing was really interesting. And I feel like that might be related to like some of the adamantine family generation stuff from Vajrayana Buddhism.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty common in Taoism too. You know, if you read a book called the you know, from the Ling Bao, for example, the Book of 5 Talismans, it's all about 5 visualizations of a 5-fold assembly of immortals in all the relevant colors and that sort of thing. So totally there. There's also 5 elements stepping, you know, which is common in martial arts and in Daoist ritual, you know, so you got that going for you as well. Because Bagua as a style is also strongly related to much older Neigong forms, you know, which is one which is preserved in our tradition. You know, it's not a martial art, but it's similar. You literally walking the Bagua, same as you guys, except there's no, you know, dragon palms at the front. It's usually like your hands behind your back, in the small of your back where your nen is. Okay. And you actually have to, in real life, line up with the Big Dipper as well. So you have to use your compass or your planisphere, whatever you choose to use, to make sure you're facing the right direction, you know, and all that sort of thing. And there's breathing as well. Be interesting to see a Bagua guy put that into action. Right.
So isn't that a lot of the like was it Pace of Yubu, I believe it's called?
Yeah, that's the older name for it, you know, but you know, there are hundreds of varieties of the paces of Yu. Big Dipper stepping, Southern Dipper stepping, 5 elements stepping, 9 palaces stepping, probably one you're a bit more familiar with.
Yes,
then there's rarer ones like soul catching stepping and 5 ghost stepping, and there's many various steps for bringing in, taking away, contacting specific entities, descending into the underworld to rescue souls, or ascending to heaven, like a kind of astral travel type thing. But that's not exactly what it is, but it's the nearest Western thing we've got. So there are many forms of stepping. The idea behind the stepping is a difficult one to explain. But basically, if you want to put it in a way, it's a way of tracing chi patterns on the earth, right? So that's the best way to put it. Right? Okay. But it's also, by meditation, you've linked up a whole complexity of symbols over time, related to each step. And
so in this one, you have a Luding Lujiao. Did I say that right?
Loading Lojia.
Okay. So
it doesn't matter, because there are hundreds of pronunciations. If a Chinese ever tell you, oh, this is the correct pronunciation, it's probably not. because your pronunciation is probably correct in some part of China, you know.
Okay.
You know,
when you mentioned the Big Dipper a moment ago, I wanted to bring up, like, that's actually how we work with it in our system of the Kujikiri that I received through the Shingon line.
Right. And that's how it should be done. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're doing the Big Dipper basically with the different mudras and also centers in the body as you go up.
That's correct. That's the correct form. That's how it started off in China. Even though a lot of people don't know that. Most people would go, well, yeah, but the first reference is in the Bao Puza, man. Yeah, right. That's the first thing they'll say about, you know, well, yeah, it was, but it also had indirect references in other texts. And there are other traditions which aren't from the Bao Puza. Like the Bao Puza, you would be using, you know, something like this. I just happen to have one like this. You know, you have 5 elemental cloths of command flags, something like this. This is what the Bao Puza says. You put these on the mountain, and so already you're invoking 5 elements. So there's a clue. Okay, you have 9. You know, we call it Jiuzi, by the way. In fact, the proper Chinese name is Jiuzi Qimen, which means 9-character mysterious gate.
Okay.
So it relates to a divination system too, but the divination system relates to a magical system too. Very ancient times when magic was much more powerful because people had the time to do it. They weren't like me and you on the internet, right? Right? You know, they could like walk, you know, disappear in a flash and stuff like that. Okay. And this is where that whole Josa comes from. You know, it's like this certain tradition. And we can trace it back basically to a deity called Zhou Tian Xuan Yu. Okay.
That's
so Zhou Tian itself should give you a clue, right? It kind of means 9th heaven or 9 heaven, mysterious girl, profound girl. You know, you can give it a number of translations.
When I look into her, I see a lot of crossover with Inanna from Assyrian mythology.
Yeah, she's a war goddess, and she also has that sexual aspect. You know, a lot of people don't know is that Zhou Tian Xuan Nu. Yeah, in modern China and Singapore, and everything they think of her as like Guan Yin. You know, that is really, you know, like she wasn't like that at all. Right. That's the problem with Daoist orthodoxy. They take a goddess or a shamanic spirit and they turn it into something which it isn't. This is where you need to be careful. But now, let's take Zhou Tian Xuan Nu in history. First references, she's not even human in form. She's a bird, like a crow or a raven or something like that. So that has that war aspect to it already, right?
Would that be related to the 3-legged crow?
Probably not. Okay, because that's a solar symbol. Okay, but I can see where you're coming from, right? So, so she seemed to be this goddess, which was like about birds, messenger of heaven, that sort of thing. Then later on, we see the more common form, you know, and she's considered like coming from Venus. There's your Inanna connection, Ishtar, if you like. Okay, she's great at war and she loves sex. Okay, she has this manifestation called the Plain Girl, Su Nu. Yeah, who teaches the sexual tradition to the Yellow Emperor, while Zhou Tian Xuan Nu teaches magic, a particular form of martial art magic. And part of that, I believe, was Jiuzi. Okay, all right. So, and also she's accredited with inventing the Qimen Dongjia system.
Okay.
And these things are all connected. Yeah. And so you've got this Qimen Dongjia, Jiuzi, Big Dipper, war, all connected into one art. Yeah, which is really interesting, you know.
Yeah, I do find that interesting. One of the people I had on my podcast recently, Harry Minogue, he was talking about in the Five Ancestors Kung Fu style, they have a form that's entirely dedicated. He said it translates to like Lady in the Green Dress, but you know, it's a reference to Jushan Nu.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, she was, you know, a war goddess, you know, so, but more than a war, you know, this is the problem with Western style academic categorization. We base our system on, you know, I'm a graduate. I suffered from this for years, of this Aristotelian obsession with categorizing everything into a neat little niche. Yeah, and you take that attitude and you try to bring it into Chinese culture or any religious or spiritual culture, you're asking for trouble, in my opinion. She wasn't just a war goddess. That's one of our, you know, aspects, if you like. There's more to war than war, you know. Right. There's so I think it's quite important to have that in mind. And she had, there's a whole system of ancient books which talk about, and traditions which talk about magic that specifically she taught, you know. Along similar lines is the Great Mother of the West, you know. You might have known, you know, the immortal Empress.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. You know, she had the Peaches of Immortality and you know, the abodes of the Jasper Lake and that sort of thing. And a lot of teachings come from here too. But again, that's another misunderstood even by modern Chinese religious culture, is a misunderstood deity who has shamanistic origins, which you know, she was a leopard goddess originally, you know.
Oh,
so
I did not know that.
Yeah, she, you know, modern renditions may still show her with a leopard, you know, but now they show this kind of like, you know, kind of hot looking middle-aged Asian woman, you know, sort of sat there, you know, all clean and tidy. And actually she was just like really wild, you know, leopard, and they describe her fangs and all this sort of thing, you know. But yeah, there's a lot of ideas there which for, you know, to reassess, you know, some of the ideas that we have about sort of Chinese deities, especially in terms, especially if you're a practitioner, you know. So
there's a lot of references to big cats throughout Chinese art. So Bagua has a lot of lion imagery. Xingyi has tiger and leopard in some of them. You know, it's interesting that you say that that she's associated to the leopard, because one of my Kung Fu ancestors, his nickname was Son of Lion and Leopard. And so that gives me an idea that the leopard is more the female side of it than.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, but the tiger's always been considered mainly female anyway, you know, in Chinese culture, right? It's only, you know, us, you know, Westerners, you know, right, you know, tiger's strong, me Tarzan, tiger man, you know, right? But, you know, it's actually a female, mainly not always, but mainly a female symbol. White tiger, for example, very good mother, you know, was the idea behind it. Same as the leopard, you know. There's a lot of that, you know. Well, if you've ever pissed off your wife, you know what I mean. Right.
I've not been married yet, but I do have a son.
Right, okay. You got that coming then, right? Right.
Yeah. So, you know, I really have enjoyed looking at the things that you've shared through the years. You have the Three Mountains Facebook group, and you kind of backed off of social media with this translation process that you're going through currently.
Yeah.
I was kind of curious about, what was it? The immortal Zhang Sanfeng. Do you have any information about him?
Okay. say the name for me again, because sometimes people pronounce things in different ways.
Yeah, Zhang Sanfeng. It's
the Daoist, the Tai Chi, the supposed Tai Chi guy. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, I don't really know a lot about him, to be honest with you. You're probably asking the wrong person.
Okay.
Because I'm not really a Tai Chi guy either. Right.
Well, my Chen, right? You'd say Chen style for a little while.
Yeah, but it's not. I'm not really a Tai Chi guy. Like you get some people, that's their life. They know every little thing about it. And so yeah, I did study Tai Chi, but I'm not really. The Japanese have a saying, is to smell too much of martial arts. I've avoided this because, from about the age of 13, I would say, up to about the age of 30, maybe, I was martial art obsessed. All I lived, and the way I, forgive me for saying it, the way I was looking at life through this martial art lens all the time, it wasn't very healthy for me sometimes in my relationships, my interactions with people. This is my problem, not martial arts problem, by the way. So I became really highly strung, and everyone was every guy in the street and every situation was a potential combat situation, which I should be, that was like constantly sprung, ready to,
Yeah.
So I found it became an impediment for me personally.
For me personally, I found that it's kind of done the opposite because I grew up.
Yeah, it does for some people. Yeah.
Right. I grew up in a very crazy place where people were murdered in my neighborhood on a regular basis, and
right.
Martial arts has really helped me get through some of my trauma, honestly.
Sure. Yeah. I'm just saying this on a personal level, it's even though I still practice some martial arts, but I don't make it an obsession, and I don't go on the internet looking at other people's techniques going, oh yeah, but that wouldn't work in an MA gym, or you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And well, my Tai Chi is better than your Tai Chi because my master flicks his wrist here, and
well, we have
really
this palm instead of this palm, right?
Yeah, it should be like this. It should have a hollow in the palm. It should be flat. The fingers should be together. The fingers should be apart. It gets really stupid, right? Yeah. And so even though I love martial arts, I don't really talk about it that much, and I don't really like to get involved in groups online and everything because it turns into this. Yeah. Not you. I mean, what we're just talking about.
It gets to be a point where you lose camaraderie. Like you're no longer talking to another person as a potential enjoyable conversation, right? It's now a competition. Yeah. It's not fun.
Yeah, I mean, it gets really, and actually some of the worst people are the people that should know better. The Chinese themselves, it's like even when I'm in sort of like China and in Malaysia, all the martial artists are all at each other's throats, and all the feng shui people hate each other. It's crazy. Well, and the very one thing that it should be doing is bringing us back to the one. But instead has a reverse effect, and it makes everyone the many. Right? So it's nuts. So I don't get involved in conversations about martial arts or what techniques I use or my teachers, because it will turn into this domino effect of criticism. And so.
Well, the reason I brought up Zhang Sanfeng a moment ago is because Marnix Wells and Scott Park Phillips recently had a conversation. They were talking about the sexual aspects of him, and the Sanfeng part of his name might be a reference to three peaks in sexual practices. That's the lips, the breasts, and the pubic mound.
Yeah, it could be. Or it could be a reference to the three mountains in Wudang. So, it's, they're both good. It could be both,
Right.
I wouldn't know. So I wouldn't know, but yeah, the three peaks the three peaks thing comes from Su Nu Jing, the sexual manual written by the manifestation of Zhou Tuanshan, Xuan Nu. So it goes back to her again, right? So I really don't know much about him. I know about some really obscure people you've probably never heard of,
Right.
Like, right, because I went in a different direction.
Right.
There's a stuff that, like Zhang Sanfeng's a very interesting guy, probably what he was doing it's debatable whether he had anything to do with Tai Chi for starters.
Right.
Right.
I just find it interesting that all of these different traditions, they tend to mention him.
Yeah.
And so I think there might be something to it. It's like I try to listen to what people tell me, right?
Right. Yeah. So, for me, it could be, or it might not be.
Right.
But the real secret is it doesn't matter.
Right.
Right. I think Zhang Sanfeng has become a symbol of a certain, approach, and maybe a certain archetype that we need, for these kind of things. Like one of the few times I have been involved in martial arts conversations about Tai Chi, and you mentioned the Daoist links or Zhang Sanfeng, people like that. People start having a go at you. Yeah, it's like, and they start saying, "Oh yeah, and then they show all these like videos of like all the modifications they made for Tai Chi, for the MMA circuit and things like that. It's like so missing the point.
Right. Right. It is funny when I was learning Chen style, they basically told my teacher that if he wanted to learn any of the esoteric stuff, he'd have to go elsewhere. So
yeah,
it's kind of
the first martial art I ever learned was actually Cui Li Fo. Okay. Cui Li Fo. Yeah, and and I was a 13-year-old kid, and I was like doing these, tiger crane and all that. It's great stuff. It looks good, and and I also asked about this kind of thing about the more esoteric side of things, because I've always been a bit this way inclined, even as a kid. And I asked about all this, and he frankly said, apart from the basic Qigong, you're not going to find that here, And he frankly said there's a difference between martial art Qigong and Neigong, which is a completely different thing.
I agree. And the thing that I find is that throughout time they've been trying to combine them, just make it into one. And it's interesting how this has reached this condensed curriculum.
Yeah. I think it's difficult to, I think you go through stages. I think it's been mentioned before that you begin as a warrior, become a scholar, and then a Taoist. So warrior for us is the like infantile stage, and then the anal stage, in Freudian terms.
Right.
And you got then you have the scholarly stage, which is your oral stage, in a sense. And so, but whether it's that linear, I don't know. It's just what some other guy said. It's not my belief.
Right.
So.
I've heard some people say that you need to have, was it 5 or 6 excellencies to be a proper gentleman or something like that? So,
yeah, painting, calligraphy. I think painting, calligraphy, playing an instrument like, the gujin and this kind of thing. And there's some other, I think they're the main ones, to show that you're a gentle. It's like a Renaissance man in Europe, So,
right. And it's not something everyone can do. Like I'm useless with music.
Yeah. Yeah, but there's a lot to be learned from music, even if you not very good at it, So, as you know, music has an esoteric aspect, notes, harmonies, things like that. Yeah.
Right.
So it's worth having a look at, even as a theory, even if you don't want to play music. But listening to it is just as valid, you know. Right?
Yeah, and I don't really listen to music anymore, honestly. I don't know what happened, but after my son was born, I just stopped for whatever reason.
Yeah, you probably get more noise as it is, right? So
right? Got to be able to hear for the kid.
Yeah.
You can't have music blasted over it. But you know, it is interesting. I have found like there have been some interesting effects when I listen to like the overtone singing from Mongolia and Tibet, and
yeah, totally. There's definitely a kind of vibrational quality there, which can repetitive with a kind of drone to it, which can put you in a trance state. Yeah, for sure.
I experienced a Mongolian practice called Nur, and my teacher, you know, I mentioned that guest house a little bit earlier. He sat down and he's like, okay, I'm going to do this, and he starts doing these overtone noises, like you know, different ones. And then as he starts going, the room was literally singing like a bowl. It was insane. Like he's chanting this deep overtone stuff, but then the whole room is vibrating like a singing bowl.
Sure. Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, resonance, right? You know.
Yeah, it was incredible. It's something that I'm trying to apply myself to the basics of, because that resonance in the face can, you know, like really get some stuff going as far as your light perception. I don't know if you've noticed that with certain things, like the light colors can change in your inner eye and that sort of thing.
Well, of course. Yeah. It's what we do, right?
Right.
So yeah, sound, color, form, the three aspects of any spiritual tradition.
And in Buddhism, it's mantra, mandala, and mudra, right?
Right. Same thing, right?
Yeah.
Right. You know, so yeah, you'll find in most traditions, you know, I mean, I don't sit here and say, oh, you know, Taoism, just because I happen to be a Daoist. I don't, you know, I put Daoist in comma because people might have the wrong idea when I say that. Okay. So I do that really annoying Englishing and put it in inverted commas. But the point is I don't think that Taoist is the #1 religion and you must convert or die, you know, because I think every tradition is Tao. Yeah. Even Buddha said that anyone who speaks truth that is also speaking from the words of Buddha. And I feel that applies to if a Jew says it or a Christian says it. Yeah, I think it's as that their truth. And even though some religions have become a bit, you know, really controlling and everything, their original basis was something quite different. They just become tools of the world of illusion, you know, to control people.
Right.
What we call the red dust, you know, in Taoism, all the illusions of the world. Yeah. Right. The smoke and mirrors, if you like, of existence is it's called the red dust, which I think is a very evocative image. And when the dust clears away, you see the truth. And this is a visual image I like to, you know, we give to people. Very old traditional image from Taoism. And every religion or spiritual system has the capability to do that. But some religions can make it worse, you know, but in generally speaking, I don't think Taoism is like the #1, you know, I'm not thumping any tubs or anything. Right. I think Buddhism is valid, Taoism is valid, a real Christianity is valid. I would swing towards more Gnosticism though.
I as well, yeah.
Right. And you know, so I do think it has its I mean, we have our own way of doing things. We have our own symbols, which is like programming ourselves so we can understand things when they come through, you know. Maybe they're not real in the same sense that if I have a thermometer, for example, right, this is a really crude example. I have a thermometer, it's got like 0 to 60 on it or something, or 0 to 100, sorry. And I've got my mercury in there, right? The numbers aren't real, the centigrade or the Fahrenheit system isn't a real thing. Yeah, it's the way we measure things, right? It's the same as Daoist symbols and things like that. They're like the Fahrenheit system or the degree system. There is something real behind it, which there is a temperature. I mean, it's bloody hot today, for example. And so there is a real something there, but the the symbol system of every culture, is just that,
The Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao, right?
Yeah, they got some reality behind them. I've seen them for myself, right? And they can represent real intelligences in the universe.
Has your system got a lot of dragon working?
Well, yeah, right. I mean, straight, depends what you mean by dragon working as well. They're dragons are what rough, how would I put it? They're creative forces, yang creative forces, which inhabit our earth, but they also represent energy itself.
Right.
I mean, we have some modern Taoists would argue that DNA is a kind of dragon.
I've been visited by some dragons, and one of them looked like a Tesla vortex, which I found really cool.
Well, they are energy, and they make I suppose the best place to start off with dragon culture would actually be to study feng shui, something like that.
Okay.
Which you're kind of doing when you do Bagua, if you're doing it properly, is anyway, because you're dealing with the earth all the time, and so the most basic dragon in sort of like a Daoist cosmology would be the azure dragon, Qigong, which is like up there, but also down here because it is up there, right?
But that's the one associated to the east, right?
Yeah, that's right. Wood, east, all those kind of correspondences. But it's got definite it's got a definite symbolism that's worth looking into through meditation and what have you. But also, when you think of the dragon, right? Well, basically, you've got 28 sets of constellations, what you'd call the lunar mansions, maybe. I don't know how much you know about astrology, but the moon travels roughly about 28 days and it passes through certain stars. And the Chinese divided them into 28 xiu, depends how you want to say it, mansions along the ecliptic, whether the yellow road, as we call it. It hasn't got Dorothy on it, it's got the sun, right? Okay. So around the ecliptic, and that's a dragon. Okay. Right, that yellow path, and that's a yellow dragon.
Okay. But
also a part of that, 7 of those, divided into 4 parts. Yeah, you've got 4 sevens, and this also relates to the human body. There's too much to go into on a podcast. Right. But there's an element of the dragon, of the Azure dragon, and that's got 7 constellations associated with it, which are worth looking into. So there's a top tip for you. Yeah. As above, so below. You've heard it all before. Yeah, right. So it's worth looking at that cosmology in relation to your alchemy and your Neigong. So you've got that yellow road. And what's one of the main practices in Daoist Neigong?
The yellow dragon. There's so much yellow dragon stuff within.
Yeah, I mean, just take the I hate the term because it's actually not right.
Microcosmic
orbit. Yeah, right. I don't know where the hell did that come from. But anyway, Right. I think it's from that Charles Luck book, actually, originally.
Small heavenly circuit, you know, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's just a label, right? So just take that alone. You actually create, you know, that's the yellow road inside you. Yeah.
Okay.
And that connects to all those constellations and those bits and bobs we're talking about. Yeah.
Interesting.
So you can do your own research. You can piece it together, because, you know, the general rule of teaching is you tell everyone everything. They become lazy and they don't think for themselves. Yeah. So, you know,
right.
You know,
they don't go find it. You know, one of my teachers years ago, he said, if I tell you, it'll take you forever, but if you go find it, you'll get it quickly. So I'm not going to tell you.
Exactly. You know, because you need that buzz of finding out something. You know, in fact, the word theory, you know the origin of the word theory?
I don't.
Pythagoras, right? Great mathematical mystic. Okay, trying to find the right word then. Okay, the reason that he did all that math and everything, right, it's not because he just wanted to look clever and make, you know, and make our lives miserable at school, right? You know, right. He gave the students mathematics without the answers. So when they finally got it, oh yeah, they got that buzz. Theory, yeah, comes from that buzz, which means to be one with God. Theorion.
Interesting. I was not aware of that. Thank you.
So this is the way that, you know, when people just want answers on a plate all the time, a la Facebook, you know, sort of a la, you know, don't always give them the answers. That's my bit of advice. Let them experience the buzz of finding out something for themselves. Don't take that from them just to sound clever, you know.
Right. You know, I recently made a connection between a stellated octahedron and the Bagua.
Right, yeah, sure.
And, you know, I don't really share that with people, but, you know, how exactly it relates.
Well, I think there are some things, though, where you can give the clues, but don't just don't give everything away, because if you don't give people anything, then they're never going to find anything anyway, right? Because they don't know that there is that way to think. You know, you can post a picture or something, or, you know, but I think it's just as important not to teach as it is to teach. You know, one of those Daoist Buddhist things, isn't it? Almost cliched, right?
Wait till the right question's asked, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, there's so many cliches in this game, you know, right?
Yeah. You know,
right. Yeah. So
crazy stuff to get some of this knowledge.
Yeah. Like when I first was on the internet, you know, after China, because I'd been starved of Western internet for so long, it's like a completely different ball game now. But, you know, and people would send me daily, you know, be like water, and it's like, oh God, please, not again. Right.
It gets interesting, you know. I've been doing some research myself, and that Western internet thing, it can really lead you down some rabbit holes.
Yeah, sometimes in a good way, you know.
Yeah.
Like some people, you know, sometimes, you know, people have got that little bit of snippet of knowledge, and you think, oh wow, yeah, you know. So it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? The internet. Sometimes it could be a really, you know, powerful tool to research and learn from other people, connect with people we wouldn't have met, for example. Or it can be, you know, the most life-sapping vampiric parasite, you know, that you can lay your hands on. Depends how you use it, you know.
Right. Yeah, it can be incredibly triggering if you're not completely stable, you know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, yeah, it's a time bomb for some people.
I had to disconnect from a lot of Facebook groups, and, you know, I've definitely encountered some weird people through the internet, you know, other Kung Fu masters. you know, like when that thing with the tennis player being sexually assaulted came out in the news, you know, they were all kinds of wild speculations, you know, about how she was being tortured and Xi Jinping's an evil Ludong sorcerer and all this other stuff. And I can't jump on that bandwagon, right? Like I can't.
Yeah. Oh, the everything's a conspiracy thing, you know. Yeah. You know, probably the greatest obstacle of man is ignorance, you know, and sometimes, you know, these little, you know, game of conspiracy, you know, to make our lives more exciting and interesting, can take away from an even more scary truth, you know, which is, you know, I don't need to say it, you know, that there's so much more to people, yeah, than they realize, you know. People are these amazing spiritual beings who are here having to experience life on this planet for certain reasons, in certain ways, and it's not in the benefit of the world as it is now for people to awake, right? Part the red dust and see truth and who they really are, right? Then that's the biggest truth. You don't need all conspiracies and everything. And it's not even a conspiracy. It's just, you know, there's a certain system in place based on, you know, money and wealth and power, which are the biggest obstacle to people developing, because they're caught up in this little world of things that don't really matter that much, you know. It's like, if only they could really find out how beautiful and powerful they are, you know.
Yeah, I agree. It's amazing what happens when you just sit with yourself for a little while and let things be quiet and everything settle.
It is, but you're going to have to face the fact that for many of us, including for myself, it can be a painful process.
Yeah, it can be. You know, I've definitely had times in meditation where I'm sitting down and I'm having a PTSD flashback to a stroke that I had in my early 20s, you know, so
Right.
that happens,
Yeah,
right? Like
sure.
You have to just let that pass and get back to your practice.
Yeah, don't cling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, you know, you know, I just want people, you know, it's probably a bit ideal. I've always been an idealistic, you know, my parents were hippies, you know, so, right, you know, so.
I was raised in the opposite manner.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of this Eastern stuff for me personally was like a rebellion against Christianity. And
right. No, I joined the military to rebel, right?
Okay.
When I was younger.
That's a little different.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, but it was part of my learning process. You know, it's something I had to go through. So when people talk about when people, you know, so, you know, I've been, you know, I was, you know, a good 10 years in the military, you know, so.
You did cryptolinguistics, correct?
That's right, yeah. Obviously, I still can't talk about a lot about it, yeah, but I don't want to sound like, you know, James Bond or something, but
right.
You know, I was in the Royal Navy, and I was what they call a CT, a communications technician, you know, which is just another way of saying reading other people's stuff, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I met another cryptolinguist that was stationed in Taiwan recently for the U.S.
Right.
Army. I almost went into that field myself prior to having the stroke. I had about 7 languages, so.
Right.
And then
that's a shame, man.
Just gone.
But don't worry, you know, you can still have this aspiration. You're still young, but yeah, it's a good field. But the problem is eventually, you know, there were a couple of reasons why I left in the end. One was to pursue my own interests, my spiritual ones. I've always, you know, since I was a kid, you know, I expect that most people you talk to in the spiritual realm will talk about childhood experiences. Yeah, you know, and I'm a classic one of those, right? You know, so I had that, and then, you know, I joined the military really to pay for my degree. You know, that's the main reason, right? They paid my degree. I got to travel and experience places I really wanted to go, which I couldn't have done from my background because I don't have rich parents, you know. I mean, they spent all their money at Hendrix concerts and stuff, you know. So, you know, but they're not that bad, right? So, you know, it gave me, you know, a means of earning a living, getting my degree, and travel. So, I chose a field where I'm not on the, you know, I'm not in the infantry or something, you know, sort of, right, yeah, right. So after that, that's when I decided to pursue my career, you know, not career, career is the wrong word, my entry into the spiritual realm, you know, and sort of look at the reality behind it all, or Gen reality, you know, to find out what that was for myself, which may not be the same as yours or his, you know, because we're all, even though we're all one, we're also all unique, you know.
I've had some really interesting experiences since I got into some of the deeper levels, you know, not just doing the Kung Fu stuff, you know, sitting down on my butt and actually trying to connect to heaven. And I find it really interesting that there's a lot of crossover between the more modern starseed community and traditional Buddhist and Taoist stuff. One of my teachers very plainly said that he was from Arcturus. And, you know, I've had experiences of being another non-human being, trying to like translate like an alien algebra, you know, like it was like a past life memory or something. So I keep finding.
Well, alien algebra is easy. It's the women I don't understand. Right?
It's trippy, you know, these past life experiences that come up sometimes. And I know that not everybody gets those.
There's some interesting ideas there. It's not something I've explored myself, but certainly there's something to be said for. I don't like to use the word extraterrestrial, actually. You know, ET. I prefer like extra dimensional when it comes to these kind of topics. Is Arcturus really a symbol? Or is it actually the star? You know, something to question. You know, so is Arcturus, that's in Scorpio, right? As a star. I could be wrong. Yeah,
I'm not sure. I think the star is Bootes, and it's like pointed to by the Big Dipper, I think, or it goes.
Okay. Oh no, yeah, Arcturus is in the Great Bear, of course. Yeah, right. Even means bear in Greek. Okay, yeah, right. So I'm thinking of Antares. That's right. Okay, right. So Arcturus, yeah. Okay. Well, there's a Taoist connection, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, yeah, I mean the seven Dipper lords, and there's a whole book just about visiting the Dipper deities.
Really?
Emperors, princes. Yeah, it's called the Seven Flying Satchels. You know, it's in the Taoist canon. It's got these really specific meditations, and even sort of, you know, well, the book to read about this is, I think, Elizabeth Conn. She's done the translation, the one that Jerry Allen Johnson ripped off. Yeah, so the
Olivia Conn, maybe.
Yeah, that's it. And she did, yeah, Olivia Conn, she does a really good translation, or part of that, you know. But I can't remember which book. I read it ages ago now, right? But she describes a process where, you have this ecstatic flight up into the Big Dipper and meet the Dipper maidens, and sometimes naughty things happen, and all that sort of thing,
Right.
But it's straight out of the Daoist canon, right? So, but I expect it's one that Quan Jen would be like frown at you for reading, right?
That's funny because there's like a Quan Jen folk novel that has a very similar story. So like one of the immortals that was taught by the founder of Quan Jen in this folk novel, I think it's called The Seven Taoist Masters. He ascends
I know the one, yeah.
Yeah, he ascends up to heaven, and the Queen of Heaven sees him lusting after some of her maidservants, and so she sends him back down to work on his lust, and he becomes a trans courtesan in a brothel.
Right. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, I don't think Quan Jen or Chan Jen is exactly as prudish as the modern.
I mean that's the same as China generally. Don't forget, there's been a great revision of everything since since at least 1911, even Quan Jen. So a lot of the saucier things. I mean, nowadays I talk about the four classics, for example. So you've got Hong Lo Mong, the Dream of the Red Mansion, and Journey to the West, Tales of the Marsh, and which one am I missing? Three Countries, right? Three Nations. So, but there's a fifth, but they don't count it anymore. It's called the Plum in the Golden Vase, because it's so sexual. It's basically a sex manual describing loads of like sexual techniques, but in a novel form. It's actually a really good book if you're into like I say tantra. I'm going to use it in that way, in the Western way. And if you're into like the sexual side of things, but you can't bear Mantak Chaya, for example, then read that. Right. So
I have encountered a few people that have trained with Mantak Chia, and most of them go really manic.
Yeah, because I don't know, it's a weird one. I actually, he put out some really good stuff originally. Okay, like some of the early stuff is really good. Then it starts getting nuts. It's like, it's not what he was originally taught. It's like stuff that he'd come up by himself, to basically get the old dollars, right?
Right, so, keep the books going.
Right, mate. All right. We've moved on from the old Tao, right? So give us a couple of those ponies, and we'll give you male orgasm.
Yeah, the $1 million point, and
right.
all that nonsense. Thankfully, we've had some more systems come to light since the last few decades, and people can connect to things.
There's a system for everyone. That's what I like. I mean, I don't think I belong to the Maoshan organization, obviously, but I don't think it's right for everyone. Some people would absolutely hate it, right? They think, wow, I just want to do contemplative Taoism, or I just want to do some Tai Chi, and I just want to, stand and hug a tree or whatever. But some people really love it, because it's right for them. So I always know when it's, so I don't think that, we're the big badasses of Taoism or anything. We're just a system. There are lots of choices for everyone.
I've really enjoyed what you've put out. It's a lot of information that I've found is applicable to some of the practices I've learned through the years.
Sure. You can, the reason I'm doing these books is not because it's like some great revelation, but rather I'm just giving people tools. And some people will choose to do the the whole system, some people will choose to take the bits they need, and that's fine by me, right? You know, I don't expect
the impression that you're very much about doing the work and not so much about, you know, the formalities of the what's the word I'm looking for? You know, the specific.
You've been talking endless reams of impractical nonsense.
Yes.
Yeah, there is a certain kind of Taoist book, you know, which kind of works around in a circle, you know, saying I did this, do that, and don't tell you how to do anything. You know, it's like reading. A lot of Taoist books are like reading about a cake which you're never going to eat.
That's a good analogy. I agree with that.
But also in the future, I intend to bring more theory out, you know, for those people that really want to get in depth, you know, like, you know, there are certain things that, you know, certain texts have never been out there, but aren't just about, oh God, another woman's alchemy, another alchemy, you know, of this. So there needs to be more stuff out there. I mean, there are hundreds of books on alchemy, and you know, the 100,000 obstacles of Wu Li Jing or something, yeah, right. You know, but you know, so I just think there needs to be more sort of like data out there, raw material, if you like, for people to work with. So, you know, okay, I've read about this in this book. Okay, so we've got alchemy, we've got Tai Chi, we have Bagua, we have acupuncture and TCM. Is that it? Yeah, we need to see what more there is, you know.
Right. Where's the magic stuff I see in the soap operas, right? Like, who teaches
Yeah, right. And a lot of it's based on reality. In fact, when you mention Taoism in China, that's what most people will think. Yeah, they won't think of this guy, you know, with a goatee sitting on the mountains, you know, like in a blue, one of those blue Wudang suits, you know, letting the world pass by, you know, and gathering up as much, you know, Jing and his Dao Dian as he can. I mean, that's part of it, okay, but it's not the entire picture. Yeah, and it's kind of been, and where academia has gone for that direction, yeah, they don't really look at the folk traditions as much, or they don't take them as seriously. Even though some of those folk traditions are far, far older than what they're, you know, I suppose the difference would be like between, you know, like in England at one time we had like the church, right? Well, we still do have the church, kind of, right? We're kind of like, well, so we've got the church on one side, and then we had the folk traditions underneath that, you know, like the cunning tradition, you know, like every village had a wise man, yeah, that probably the local vicar hated, you know, right? But went to for advice anyway when he needed it.
Or herbal medicine or something.
Yeah, he knew the herbal medicine, he knew the weather magic, he knew spells, he could leave his body and, you know, all that sort of thing, you know, dream true, as they say, that sort of thing. And the same thing has happened in China. But sort of the cunning man, right, didn't, you know, witches, if you like. The popular belief now is that they worship the horn god and all that, which is probably not true. If you actually look at cunning men's books, you know, most of the prayers are in Christian language, and use Psalm 52 to heal, you know, the apoplexy or something. And it's the same in the Chinese folk tradition. Yeah. Okay, they're not Quan Zhen, but they were practicing alchemy. Yeah. Some of it, which I can imagine some of the orthodox Taoists would be like thinking, why didn't we think of that? Right. And they're practicing the alchemy, their own medicine, they have their own kinds of acupuncture, which you're not going to learn in Beijing, you know.
Acupuncture, like as a wider practice, largely reconstructed as well?
No. They collected it and synthesized it. TCM has fared a lot better in China than religion.
Okay.
But the explanation for it and some of the folk practices have gone. Yeah. Like, for example, Moxibustion, you know Moxibustion? Right, where there are lots of forms of it, and acupuncture too, you know, like there was acupuncture for spiritual development, yeah, which has been preserved by Maoshan, you know, which is a way of like working the circuits, if you like, for certain spiritual experiences. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's an acupuncture for you know, exorcisms and what we would call paranormal pathologies rather than
like the 13 ghost points, that sort of thing.
That's being one of them. Yeah. Which is really important for you to know if you're into spiritual side of things. Yeah, you know where things are then, right? So it's worth looking into. So there's that aspect. And Moxibustion, for example, you know, there are ways of making your own ones with particular blends. Yeah, right. Not the kind of blends you're thinking of. I know you, right? Yeah, I know they're cones as well, right? Okay, right. So the way of making up their, you know, their Moxibustions in certain patterns with spells, mantras, seals. So there's a lot more to that as well, you know, not just the medical practice, which, you know, people are familiar with.
Like mugwort or tobacco.
Put it this way, there's Moxibustion for getting rid of bad luck.
Okay.
You know those moments in life where nothing's going right. Yeah. It's like, oh, and you wake up in the morning and you just don't have a spring in your step. You know, there's actual Moxibustion just for that.
Really?
Yeah.
That's very specific. That's incredible.
Yeah. But you don't see that because they couldn't really, could they? They're trying to make it a sciencey thing, you know, put on the white coat and all that, right? But you know, so you know they didn't include this in the corpus, but traditions like ours preserve these kind of things.
That's good to know. Well, Jason, we are right about 90 minutes here. I don't want to take
okay, right? Yeah.
Is there anything that you wanted to mention? I know that you're working with Mandrake of Oxford as your publisher. Do you have any new books on the pipeline?
Yeah. Okay. Right. I'm working on one main one at the moment, which is the translation of something called the Luban Sutra, or it's like in the West, for example, we've long had these grimoires like the Key of Solomon and stuff like that. But China has one too, and that's called the Luban, which is packed full of folk spells. Okay, it's got over 1,000 folk spells, you know, which include forms of Daoist magic. You know, it's got some really crazy stuff in it. You know, which you have to be, you know. But that's what I'm working on at the moment. And the good thing about this one, you don't need to be in a lineage or anything. You could just pick up a spell from it, and you know. But it has its own transmission as well. Like it has its own self-initiation. It's not something I've invented. You know, like nowadays you could buy a book, you know, where some author says, "Well, I've, you know, developed this, you know, system, you know." And this is something that's been around China for like at least 300, 400 years, probably longer. And it includes like folk feng shui, methods to avert bad luck, how to create a bowl of water which you can drink every day to get rid of all the illnesses and again bad, you know, ill fortunes, things like this, which common people can. I say I don't mean common people, right? I mean like uninitiated people, not really wanting to commit to any particular sect can do. Yeah. So that's my next publication. That's a thick one, you know, it's like that, you know.
That's a huge contribution to our knowledge base in the English speaking world. Thank you so much.
It'll be I can imagine it'd be a really good basis for people that don't want to commit to you know, an organization, that want to practice some, you know, Oriental magic, you know, which is like seen on movies and stuff.
Right.
But it's got some really crazy stuff. It's also got some dark stuff in there as well, as I should warn, you know, because we're talking about, you know, a culture that was born in war and misery and class, you know, war, if you like. So it does have, and also, you know, people were fighting each other, including Daoist schools. So it's got a lot of that in it too, you know.
Yeah, we have stories all over the place of these magical duels, right?
Yeah, because they really happened, and you know, and supposedly they happen today, you know. But anyway, so that's my next project, the Luban Sutra. I'm hoping that would be finished by December, because this one's been a tough one, you know. It's
right,
because there's so much, you know, to get out there. But that should be a good foundation book and give you an example of most types of spell you'll find in, you know, in the Chinese folk tradition, from everything from healing up to invisibility and, you know, other stuff, you know, even traveling to the underworld to rescue your friend's soul should they be in
like
trouble.
An Orphic journey.
Weather magic, you know, dragons. So you like that bit. So it'll give people a really good view of the whole thing. Yeah, a bird's eye view of the whole Chinese magical and folk tradition culture.
And does that tie in with the Fox tradition that you're translating as well?
Yeah, because the Luban, the first part, the very first section of Luban, because I'm working from 3 manuscripts, is how to call the fox to act as your magical teacher. And the fox immortal was mentioned a few times in the text. Hu Xianshi, the fox master, especially with the more mischievous spells, like someone can't boil their rice or something, you know, it's like stuff like this.
It's like putting sugar in the gas tank, right?
Yeah. So well, yeah.
So I don't want to take too much more time. I know we can chat for probably another couple of hours.
Yeah, right.
So what I'll do is I'll have links to your books from Mandrake in the YouTube description. So if anybody wants to take a look at that, they can. And is there anything you'd like to sign out with?
Well, thank you for having me. Interesting and open-minded conversation.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate everything you're doing for us.
You're very welcome.
Have a great night. I hope you get some good rest out there.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to sleep, you know, it's not very well anyway. No, I'll be fine, right? Anyway.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Right. Let's see, how do I turn this thing off?
Oh, I'm trying.
Yeah.